We're joined by Dr. Akanemo Ebong, who is the President, Association of Resident Doctors at the National Hospital, that's National Hospital Abuja chapter. And he's also a Senior Registrar, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the National Hospital. Doc, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you.
It's a really troubling piece of news that resident doctors are about to go on strike. I know that we just heard the President National of the Association of Resident Doctors, but could you shed a little more light? Because I want to imagine that when this particular notice to go on strike was issued, there should have been a reach out on the part of those who will be affected, or not those who will be affected now, but those whose duty it is to ensure that you do not go on strike, to have called by now to say, can we have a conversation? Has that happened yet?
Okay, before I answer directly, I just want to take us down memory lane. These issues, if you remember in January, we had a meeting, and our January NEC, National Executive Council meeting, on the 25th to 30th of January, after which we released the communique and we made some demands to the government. The President, as you saw earlier, has spoken about a few of them, from death in service benefits to the hazard allowance from COVID-19, to moving our members on the Give Me platform to the IPs platform, and a lot more. And this was done in January, and we gave 2 months for government to discuss with us about these issues. We had another meeting on the 6th.
They did in that period, didn't they?
Well, there was no serious negotiation on these issues. We had another emergency meeting on the 6th of March and released the communique on the 7th, sent a letter to the minister on the 7th also. And we gave another 1 month to see if things would change, if negotiations would happen. On the 28th of March, on the 27th of March actually, we had another meeting. And on the 28th, we now decided that we are going on strike after having given up to 3 months of notice. It's only then that serious negotiations started. And on the 31st, if you remember, the memorandum of action was signed. And of all the items of the memorandum of action that were signed since March, as of today, only 2 have been partially done, which is payment of house officers. Some are still being owed. Some of their monies, which were deducted for their accommodation, has not been paid to everybody. And a few, in some centers, are still being owed a few months' salaries. And the second thing, which is bench fees, which should have been abolished, a few centers have changed the name to training fees. But movement of our members from the Give Me platform to the IPs, the hazard allowance, the medical residency training allowance, none of that has seen the light of day. And this is since January when we made these demands. So when you say, has government started negotiating with us, then usually there's no negotiation done until we go on a strike. We have resumed our strike today. We never called it off. We only suspended it to give time for negotiations. But since we called off the strike on the 10th of April, we started it on the 1st of April, called it off on the 10th. Since then...
Suspended, you mean? Because you just used the word suspended.
Since we suspended it on the 10th of April, barely nothing has been done. So when we are back at this, you know, we've given enough time, we've tried to negotiate, we've tried to do things to make the system work, but unfortunately, we are here again.
April, I mean, we're in August. Today is the 2nd of August. We do know that you've had certain champions. I mean, at the political level, there have been champions who have been quite concerned about the plight of doctors and, you know, think that it is not right that, you know, they'll have to go on strike first before their issues are taken into consideration. I do recall that the Speaker of the House of Representatives intervened in the matter on a number of occasions. What did that yield?
Yes, we're grateful to the Speaker, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. We have been able to get the Residency Training Act put budget to be budgeted for. It has been put in the budget, but still it hasn't been paid. This is since January, since March, since April, May, June, and we're in August now. The year is about to end, and we still think that more should be done. We still think more could have been done. And what we want is to see results. We don't want promises. Every time we threaten a strike, negotiations start, then we are promised we call off or we suspend our strike, and then we are back to zero again.
Have there been any, serious questions. I mean, while you're at the negotiating table, have you ever asked, you know, is there a problem? Is it that government is broke? Is it that they're not able to meet their obligations to doctors? What exactly has been the excuse of government, at least from when you listen to the government side?
Well, I can't speak for government, and from the negotiations, we usually get promises. We don't get, it's not possible. We get, we can do this from the memorandum of action. You could see that it was not of understanding, it was of action. This is what we will do. So those are not promises of us being broke, we can't pay. Those are promises of things we will do. So when you have a memorandum of action, I don't know how, what other excuse you can give to that.
Yeah, because the people who say that at a strike, when doctors eventually decide, or whatever striking group decides to go on strike, that what it means is that you've held a gun to the people's, to the other side's head, and that oftentimes it's like they're under some form of duress, and so will promise anything just to get you back from strike or to ensure you do not go on strike. Do you get that feeling when you're at the negotiating table?
No, we don't get that feeling. We give enough room and enough time to negotiate. When you are on a negotiation table or you call for negotiations and mostly you are ignored, you try to see people in their offices, you can't get to see them, and it's only when you call a strike that you see them, then you know that the other party is not even willing, most times, to negotiate. So I think the gun is more to our heads. We have no other option than to call a strike. When you've tried, you've negotiated, you've tried to negotiate, and sometimes you can't even reach the people you're trying to negotiate with. It's more or less the gun being to our heads.
Well, we know what impact this has on the medical sector. Right now, we've been told that COVID-19 is, I don't want to say back, it never left, but that there is a variant that is around that is quite aggressive. We've seen how it attacked some countries mercilessly, and the fears that, you know, we need to be on our guards at this time. We're wondering what this will mean for our medical system when we know that resident doctors form the bulk of workers in our medical sector. Have you thought about the implications of this on the Nigerian medical health sector?
Yes. Sadly, it may impact us. As a Nigerian, it's very easy to say it's not our portion. But what have we put in place? The onus doesn't lie only on the workers, the doctors, to sort this problem out. Government also has to play its own part. Since the last wave of the coronavirus pandemic in Nigeria here, what has happened to our isolation centers? What has happened to our healthcare system? Have we improved on it? Is it only manpower? You don't take soldiers to the battle without weapons, without equipment. You can't take soldiers to fight a war with sticks. What has government done since the last pandemic, the last outbreak? What has happened to our isolation centers? Are they still running?
You are at the National Hospital.
Yes, I am.
What is your experience at the National Hospital?
My experience is that it's the same for everywhere in Nigeria. Nigeria is not prepared. If there's an outbreak now, we don't have enough isolation spaces in the FCT to cater for it. If we don't have enough isolation spaces all over Nigeria, we do not have it. We don't have the equipment. Do we have enough ventilators as of the last time till now? Have we imported as many as we needed?
Do we?
We don't.
But the figures have increased, at least at the National Hospital.
Yes, they have increased. They have improved, but by how much? These improvements were done at an emergency time, but since then, what is the plan for the next 5 years, if I should say, short-term period? Do we have more? Have we made funds available to improve our healthcare system so that, should in case we have this same problem, will we be better prepared?
So, in your own estimation, it would seem that no lessons have been learned.
Exactly. Sadly, but that's the truth.
So, if this is where we currently are, what are the chances that anything is going to happen you know, now that you're calling a strike? Because one would imagine, the first question I asked you was that when you gave an ultimatum again, saying you're going to start a strike, resume your strike action today, there ought to have been some movement, at least maybe a few phone calls here and there, and some attempts to call you to a negotiating table to maybe show you what it is that has happened so far behind the scenes on the memorandum of action which you're yet to see or which is yet to materialize. Have there been any conversations on that?
Yes, there have been, but they still haven't gotten to any logical conclusions. We have not been paid our MRTF, our medical residency training allowances. We have not hazard allowance since the last corona outbreak is still 5,000 per health worker all over the country, which cannot treat, should I say, the most basic of ailments in the hospital from the cost of living now. Our residents on Give Me's platform who are receiving percentages of their salaries, these are doctors who work every month, are still not earning complete salaries. Our doctors in state tertiary hospitals, some of them are being owed up to 19 months of salary arrears. How can a doctor work for almost 2 years and not be paid? We're still at our stage 0. We haven't improved. So when you say the negotiation there are some basic things that should have been done. And if you see them being done, even though if you can achieve some halfway, then you can say, okay, let's keep trying. The government is doing its part, we will do our part. But when you see that the other end is breaching an agreement, you have no other options.
Let me take this to my colleague, Ayo, in Lagos. Ayo.
Yeah, thank you, Mokwe. Dr. Ebong, the first thing that came to my mind as your conversation with Mokwe began was to ask. I mean, I like to decrypt issues. So when we talk about government, it's natural for us to think is the Federal Ministry of Health. I'm just wondering what the responsibility or role of the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria, MDCN, is in all of this conversation that we are having. Because I remember before the strike was suspended initially, there were also talks around the role of MDCN at the time. What's the latest on that? Has the needle moved a little?
Well, on the role of MDCN is a regulatory body. They deal with our licenses, licensing of doctors, and the issues we have with them currently is mainly with our house officers. The recruitment, some centers still don't have house officers recruited. The salaries being paid, as I said earlier, some house officers are being owed 1 to 2 months of salaries, and then the refunds of their accommodation that was taken from their salaries, not everyone has received it. So we still have issues with the MDCN and also issues of remittance of their dues with MDCN. So MDCN is not supposed to pay us resident doctors' salaries, but the issues we have with them mainly borders around our house officers.
Well, there's another one, that is also making the rounds. There's a directive from the federal government which has already been executed in Lagos. Could you, talk to us about that one? And is that the main reason for this resumption of strike?
It is also part of our reasons for the resumption of this strike. I think on the 12th of April, there was a circular from the head of service removing house officers from the scheme of service, albeit saying they are not doctors, they are still in training. But we know that they have gone to school, they have graduated, they have gotten their medical degrees from their various universities, and they are just doing their internship. So that they have a provisional license already, and they're doing their internship to get their permanent licenses. But they have been removed from the scheme of service, and Lagos is about to implement it, and that is part of the fight we're trying to, the issues we're trying to resolve at the moment. Why remove doctors from the scheme of service? These are doctors; they are fully fledged doctors. They are only undergoing an internship program so that we can send them out to the world. Different places have their rules and regulations on internship, but these are doctors. They have graduated. they have certificates, and they're doctors. You can't say you remove them from the scheme of service just because they're doing an internship. So we are frowning at that, and we hope that that decision will be rescinded. I think the Nigerian Medical Association also has is on discussions with that also, but we are also demanding that that circular be reversed.
Well, some who don't understand what you're talking about will be wondering what's the difference between, scheme of service and whatever it is that's that they have been asked to do. Exactly what is the issue here? Does that mean that they are not allowed to work in the hospitals at all, or what exactly is the issue?
The issue is that they would no longer be placed on a salary scale. They will be given allowances, and if it is going to be counted for them that they have started their service in the ministry, that period will not be counted for them.
All right, well, that definitely is something worrying. I'm pretty sure that you guys are on top. But you also mentioned the NMA the other time, in one of your comments just recently. Exactly what's the role or take of the NMA on this issue? Because I would expect that, there would have been conversations among industry stakeholders like the NMA, the MD-CAN, and the rest of that. So at least try to get ahead of the strike before it begins.
Yes, NMA is our, should I say, parent body. It's the body for all doctors in Nigeria. And I can't speak for the executive of NMA, but I know that NMA also frowns at this circular. NMA has also tried to negotiate and put their own statements down as regarding the circular, and I know that NMA is also with us on this issue, and they are against that circular removing house officers from the scheme of service. I can't speak for them. I can only speak for NARD at this moment.
Well, there's this question. Maupe asked you this recently about, have you considered, the fate of the people that you took the oath to help? Adamu Sumaila is asking, what do you think would be the fate of inpatients at the hospital, considering the present economic predicament of the country vis-a-vis insecurity and other related problems? Don't you guys look at, the angle before embarking on strike? Mark asked you this earlier, and here is someone asking exactly the same question.
This is a very honest question, and I'm going to answer it honestly. Almost every one of us took oaths. The government took an oath. And one of the main responsibilities of government is the welfare of its citizens, including doctors, including patients. It's difficult, to put it only on us. The government also bears the same responsibility. They bear the responsibility to make sure that the patients are also taken care of. They bear the responsibility to make sure that the health system works so that doctors don't go on strike. I think the real responsibility and the people whose conscience at this time should be pricking them at the government. Government should bear this responsibility. We have tried since January, February, March, up to August to negotiate and make a way forward, to make these issues not come. We don't like strikes. I always say it. We don't like strikes. Doctors too are patients. We have family members. We have friends. And they will also need care. During the strikes, we also fall ill. We also need emergency care. So it affects us also. But the real responsibility lies on government to make sure that the system works.
Well, just to be clear, Dr. Ebong, again, my colleague asked you this, the other time, but let me just reiterate it. Just to be clear, how significantly will the health sector be impacted by a strike, when NARD members, go on strike? What's the population of members of NARD in any health facility, and how significantly would health care delivery be affected if NARD goes on strike?
In most tertiary centers, resident doctors comprise the bulk of the workforce of doctors. Nationwide, it's difficult to say in every center how many each center has. Just by me sitting down, we'll have to look at a list. But we comprise the majority of the workforce in most of the hospitals. So when there's a strike, the consultants are still working. It's difficult for them alone to carry out the daily job of a doctor. The patients will overwhelm them, and it becomes it's a difficult time for patients and also for doctors ourselves. We get to see our patients who we care for a lot in pains, and the manpower left is not enough to carry out these jobs, and it almost halts the system. The system is hurt badly, and patients usually suffer. Doctors also suffer too at this time. We see our patients suffering, and we also need care ourselves. So it's kind of a big issue for us also, and the system is almost grounded, and we don't like it. We pray that there is a speedy resolution to this, and that we move on with our lives and our work. We like to go to work. We like to work. We don't like strikes. But as I said earlier, sometimes when you try to negotiate and you try and nothing is being done, you are left with one option. And most times when we go on strike, that's when negotiations start in earnest, and that's when we get our demands met, sadly.
But the Lagos State government, for instance, is asking for a little more time from members of NRD in Lagos. I mean, owing to the actions that government has taken and actions that NARD has also taken. And so, again, we're going to ask you this question. What would make NARD right now to suspend the strike? Is it this invitation to a negotiation, or what exactly? Because sometimes I just wonder, who is supposed to initiate this conversation? Why do we always have to get to this bus stop of strike, so to speak? Who is supposed to, get ahead of this issue? It's definitely not the Minister of Health himself. There has to be someone who is supposed to do his job. Who is it that is supposed to do a job that is not doing it?
Well, first of all, as I said, we have had meetings upon meetings. We've made resolutions. We've made demands. As I said, on the
when you talk about these meetings, who do you meet with? Who are the people that you meet with? What set of people do you meet with when you are talking about these meetings upon meetings?
We meet with the permanent secretaries. We meet with the ministers. We meet with other government officials who may be representing the permanent secretaries or the ministers. We meet with government officials, even up to the ministers. So, like I said, on the 7th of March, we sent a letter to the minister saying that there was going to be crisis in the health sector if some issues were not sorted out. So we've sent letters with, even up to the minister. These are the people we expect to wade into these matters and get subordinates or representatives to look at the issues and solve them.
He also made an attempt to get
there was an attempt to, because there have been a number of issues around doctors, brain drain, and a number of other issues. I do know that some time ago, the federal government got concerned enough to have a conversation with doctors on what needs to be done. The conversation held at the presidential villa. Were resident doctors a part of that conversation?
I'm not sure about that. I can't answer for that because I wasn't there. Okay. I would expect that the resident doctors should have had a representative there.
Okay, but has there been anything being done? Because we also know that one of the issues that worries the management of hospitals nationwide is the brain drain that they're currently experiencing. Even while there was a lockdown and COVID-19 was was in full force in Nigeria, there were reports that airplanes were being brought into the country to take away our doctors, our medical personnel to other countries where they also had need for doctors. I do not know if there have been any steps taken to try and persuade our doctors to, I don't want to know what I was done on that patriotism, but at least to appeal to them to stay back and help out at home.
Yes, it's good to be patriotic. It's good to stay back and help at home. But what needs to be done when, if you have to drive a car and it keeps breaking down and breaking down, someone offers you a car that works better, even if you're a driver, and you have to drive this vehicle every day, and before you go 1 kilometer, it breaks down. You go another 1 kilometer, it breaks down. And someone offers you another car. There's the tendency for you to want to do your job. Just drive and drive smoothly on the road. So what needs to be done to curb the brain drain is for the health system to be made to work smoothly. Doctors go to work. They are supposed to be paid an allowance. They get paid it. The paltry 5,000 hazard allowance per month that a doctor receives, you upgrade it. Other countries like Ghana have done so. Our neighbors in other African countries have realized that, oh, these doctors, the hazard they get is too little. Let's do something about it. Those are the kind of things that make doctors want to stay back and help their country. But if every time you try to work, there's a strike, you try to do this, you don't get paid, somebody being owed 19 months salary, tell me how you would want to stay in the country when you're being owed 19 months of your salary. You've worked for those 19 months, and then you're not owed, and then you're not paid. And then someone tells you be patriotic. It's difficult. When you go to the markets, nobody tells you, oh, doctor, because you're a doctor, take free yams. Because you're a doctor, take free rice. Nobody does that. You pay with cash. And if it's money you've worked for, it's your due. You deserve it. So these are the issues. We are not asking to maybe build 10 million new hospitals. The basic things, just pay people their salaries. The people on Give Me's platform all over the country, they're being paid percentages of salaries. Some of them are being owed. I don't think that's too much to do.
Well, let us hope that those who are concerned and those who are responsible to ensure that doctors do not have to go on strike before they're heard would have listened to you this morning and will be able to set straight some of the issues. We're hoping that we'll also be able to see further conversations being held on this particular matter to ensure that however brief the interruption, I mean, this particular interruption will be brief because you say that the doctors have already proceeded on strike today. Is that correct? We have. Is it a warning? Is it for 2 weeks? Is it a week?
It's a resumption of our strike, which we suspended on the 10th.
So it's indefinite? It's
indefinite. It's a total and indefinite strike. We pray it will be as short as possible. We pray negotiations will yield results that we've been expecting since the 31st of March. And we hope that, because we want to work, a lot of doctors have called me saying, why are we on a strike? And I hope it doesn't last long. We hope government sorts us out. A lot of people have called me with their various concerns about the strike. We don't like strikes. We wish it ends fast. We wish government plays their own part. And we want to go back to work.
That's our desire as well. Dr. Kanimo Ebong, thank you for coming on Sunrise Elite this morning.
Thank you too.
He's the president of the Association of Resident Doctors, National Hospital Abuja chapter, and also the senior registrar at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the National Hospital in Abuja.